Finally, reflecting back on the Job disaster, God felt that he understood a few things about himself. First, he needed a break. Some time off to regain his perspective. There were troubled, destructive, sometimes even self-destructive parts of him that he needed to get a grip on. Second, he needed an ally, someone he could trust to run things on earth while he recovered in heaven for a while. This ally couldn't be just anyone either. It had to be family. He needed that now. God couldn't create his own mother, obviously, even if it would have been nice to have a mother to cuddle and soothe him and tell him it was all going to be okay. Might some of my ambivalence about women be related to the fact that I had no mother? Or if I did, that she abandoned me in a formless void, God wondered? He definitely didn't want a father. He was the father, the one and only father. He certainly wasn't going to create a daughter. That was a laughable idea. No, he had to have a son who would work for him, who would love and cherish him, and who he would love and cherish right back. It felt wonderful to God just thinking about it. He considered how he wanted to bring his son, Jesus was the name he'd picked, into existence. Should he create him fully formed? That hadn't worked very well with Adam and Eve, so God decided against it. Should he create a baby Jesus and raise him in heaven, then send him down to earth at the age of, say, 30? No, he had no idea how to raise a child, and to the extent that he'd seen how human children behaved, how disobedient they often were, he didn't want to try it either. God decided to impregnate a woman and have her raise the baby Jesus. But how to actually do it? Would he have sex with the woman?
John Amos says no.
God seriously considered the possibility, but he couldn't seem to find a woman who sparked his interest in that way. Also, why lie? He was inexperienced. The truth was that he had zero experience. He was, in other words, a virgin. And the idea of things going badly? That simply could not happen. So God chose to artificially inseminate the woman. Yes, that was a better idea. Question: once the girl was pregnant, would she be Jesus' biological mother, or merely a womb to carry the young God around in? Answer: God wasn't sure, and he felt it didn't matter much anyway, but probably just a womb.
This is Infants on Thrones, the philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Quorum.
God didn't pay much attention to Mary's pregnancy, nor did he really care much about Jesus' first 30 years of life. He did hear stories, apocryphal he assumed, of the boy's behavior, how he'd killed people for fun, and those made him smile indulgently and murmur, "That's my boy." When Jesus turned 30, though, the wheels started turning. Jesus started to preach God's truth. He quickly gained followers. The boy was smart and charismatic, quite a unique personality. If he lived 100 years, he might attract followers all over the world. Or why not allow him to live 900 years, like Methuselah? Let him travel the globe, spreading the word everywhere. Great idea, Lord, God thought to himself. At this point, however, a question began to insinuate itself into God's mind. Given the seriousness of the job he was giving Jesus, did he fully trust him? Sure, he was his son, but given that he didn't actually know this young man, they'd never met, obviously, and given how much was riding on him, God felt that he needed to put him to the test.
So he had Satan tempt him. Because think about it. God is a jealous God, right? I mean, he's described that way in the Bible. And one of the 10 Commandments is, place no other gods before me, right? But still he decides to create Jesus, who, I don't know, is kind of a threatening thing for a jealous God to create a potential rival. I mean, I really hope that Jesus doesn't turn on him, especially not when he appears to the Nephites in the Book of Mormon.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Book of Mormon stories that my teacher tells to me.
Well, welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, and I am joined once again today by Randy Snyder to finish part 2 of our interview with Chris Matheson, author of The Story of God, which you just heard a few excerpts from, and also the new follow-up, The Trouble with God, which includes Matheson's non-Mormon, never-mo take on the Book of Mormon and is really fascinating and a lot of fun, and we're going to talk about it today. So with no further adieus, let's get right to it.
Their modern conception of Heavenly Father is what they call him. He's this ultimately kind, white-bearded, gentle, always looking out for your best interests. Sometimes he gives you a little tough love because you need it. And he's just so sweet and gentle and pure. And then you then you refer to the pages of the Old Testament. You're like, what the fuck?
Right.
Like
These don't go together.
They're not even in the same universe.
Yeah, and God, I would say his lunacy is strangely, deeply built into the Book of Mormon, because what a crazy plan that is, right? He knows, because he knows everything. He's omniscient. If he's not omniscient, he's not God. He knows. He knows from the moment he begins this thing that it's going to fail utterly. I mean, he's got this whole big plan, that's like culminates in Jesus's big appearance in the sky. And like, none of it works. In fact, the purpose of it, apparently, in the end, is for it to be kind of a cautionary,
right?
Of like, don't do that. Like, everybody dies.
Yeah,
and he knows that. I mean, except the Indians, essentially, I guess. It's a crazy plan. It's a kind of an insane plan.
And I wanted to ask you about that because you were very explicit as you were wrapping up your section on the Book of Mormon. Why would you start 3,000 years of a plan that is doomed to fail? And I'm curious. So you're the author. You're the one who's ascribing motive to God in this story. What are the measures for failure or success in anything that God does? What's his end goal? What does success look like to God?
I mean, success, I think, is everybody loves him. I mean,
right.
I mean, that's what he wants. He wants everybody to love him. I mean, he wants everybody to bow down and pray. And what's New Jerusalem in Revelations? It's basically everybody wears a white robe and has God stamped on their forehead, and they pray to him all the time. That's it. That's heaven, essentially. I think that's what he wants. He wants everybody to love him, and they never do.
And if they don't,
always stripped away.
Then he can destroy them, and that's not such a bad consolation prize to the God that you've created in this book. He kind of enjoys that part of it too.
Yeah, no, it's true. He likes punishment. He loves punishment. Oh, he loves it. Punishment's really joyful for him. So you're right. It's not a bad consolation prize.
Yeah.
But if the ostensible purpose is I want to be loved, then his plans they don't work. They don't really work out.
I kind of like the tension that you created between God and Jesus, where Jesus kind of stills his thunder.
That was my favorite part. Oh my gosh. I thought that was so brilliant.
I don't know if you knew what you were doing theologically, but you hit it on the head as far as Mormon theology. They do believe that they're two separate beings, whereas the rest of Christianity, or at least Catholics and Protestants, they have this convoluted Trinity thing. And so but the funny thing about the Book of Mormon that you picked up on is that the Book of Mormon was written back when Joseph Smith theologically was Trinitarian, because he was a Puritan at the time. His theology changed a decade and a half later, and Mormons have been trying to square that with the Book of Mormon ever since. You picked up on that, but you're the whole jealous of the sun, and the sun, showing Dad, I'll show you what I can do, as he stomps down the stairway down to the North American continent.
I loved how God the Father is reduced to this small voice that just announces Jesus. And that's kind of, he's like, wait a minute, this isn't how I planned it.
He's the PA guy.
Yeah, and Jesus just totally usurps the thunder. He's like, it's my game now, bitch. Okay, so this next section that we're going to read, it's happening at the point in the Book of Mormon when Jesus has died in the Middle East, and there's all these storms and earthquakes and things happening in the New World, and God's wondering what's going on.
As God watched all of this destruction taking place, one question filled his mind. who exactly is doing all of these things, because I most certainly am not. I would never ruin such nice level roads. God looked around for the answer to his question, and he suddenly stopped short. There, roughly 50 feet away from him, staring down at earth, stood Jesus. He'd obviously just been killed. His robe was filthy, his hands and feet were gruesomely wounded, his face was stained with dirt and sweat, etched with pain. This isn't my plan, God had thought to himself. Jesus isn't supposed to destroy cities like he's fast-forwarding to Judgment Day. He's supposed to fly down and tell the North Americans all about me. That's what he's supposed to do. I'm going to march over there, and I'm going to tell him to stop what he's doing right this minute. He has no right to take over my book like this. I'm not going to permit it. I'm going to shut him down immediately. But before God could do anything, it suddenly grew very dark. It was the kind of darkness that God hadn't experienced in a very long time, like since the void, really, and he didn't like it. God wasn't sure how much time passed at that point. Was it 3 days? Whatever it was, it felt endless. And then, finally, out of the darkness, he heard Jesus begin to speak. His voice was lower than God had ever heard it before.
Behold, Zarahemla, I have burned it and its inhabitants with fire. Behold, Moroni, which I buried in the earth. Behold, Gilgal, which I sunk in the earth.
And then Jesus said something which literally made God gasp.
I am Jesus Christ. I created the heavens and the earth and all things that in them are.
And Jesus turned and looked straight at God at that moment, his eyes fierce and compelling. And God found that he couldn't move. And then strangely, he heard himself speaking in a tiny little voice.
Behold, my beloved Son,
God heard himself murmuring,
in whom I am well pleased, in whom I have glorified my name. Hear ye him.
At that moment, Jesus turned sharply away from God and marched straight down out of heaven. People on earth stared up in stunned disbelief as Jesus descended towards them like he was striding down an invisible glass staircase. Reaching the ground, Jesus stopped and looked around at the gathered crowd.
I am Jesus Christ. I have drunk out of that bitter cup my Father has given me. I have suffered the will of the Father.
God didn't like the way Jesus was looking at him as he said this. He didn't like it at all. And in that moment, he knew what only a perfectly omniscient and omnipotent God could know. Okay, it's official. Jesus is totally pissed.
So how do you deal with the God being omniscient but he's still being surprised by things? Because that was something that really, like, I loved that about this scene, that like Jesus totally takes this opportunity to go, all right, I'm in control, even to the point where he's like using God as a ventriloquist dummy, like making God, like reducing God to the role of herald and announcing Jesus' return or. So how do you deal with that, with the omniscience part?
Well, it doesn't really make any sense, of course.
Yeah.
Because why would a character who's omniscient ever be surprised or mad?
Yeah.
And he seems upset a great deal of the time. So either he's not omniscient, and in which case he's just kind of a bullshitter and he's a fraud. And, that's not really, that is a take. I mean, you definitely can build that case. And it's funny. And I certainly toyed with that. Or he's an idiot. Like he knows things, but he forgets them, kind of. Like he does know it all, but somehow he's so chaotic and disorganized that it doesn't stick. He just like he loses track. That's pretty funny too. To me, by far the best interpretation of the character is that he's mentally ill. He's deranged. There's something wrong with him. He does know. It's deliberate. He's punishing himself. The whole thing is a punishment machine. He wants to punish. He wants to be punished. He wants to hurt mankind. He wants mankind to hurt him. He wants to hurt Jesus. He wants Jesus to hurt him. Now, why? I don't know. That's a very, very disturbed character. But I think it's the most interesting, and I think it's the deepest read that I could find. And I thought it also led to the best laughs, because the idea that he's either a fake The Wizard of Oz or just a dumb shit Yeah, those are funny, but I like the idea that he's just warped.
Yeah. And again, going back to the story of God, when he's thinking about creating a Jesus, and he kind of goes through his own lack of family history, that he doesn't have a mother. Maybe that's why he doesn't like women. He doesn't have a father, and he doesn't want a father. He's the father. He doesn't want a daughter. Why would you want a daughter? Girls are worthless. It's got to be a son. That's almost like that mental illness kind of line of thinking, almost.
It totally is.
Yeah.
When I had a certain place, I started off just kind of, I don't know, just sort of taking pot shots at the thing, right? Just like, oh my God, just rolling my eyes at just how ridiculous the whole thing was. And then I just spent enough time inside it and thinking about this character that at a certain point he came to life for me. And I thought, oh man, what a brutal existence. What a almost unimaginably lonely existence this is, right? You're never touched. You never get any contact. You never have a friend. You never have a wife. You never have children. Well, you have a son and you murder him deliberately. You murder him.
Right.
You're one kind of, you've got a bunch of toadies.
Surrounded by the yes men.
Stuck up to you all the time.
Yeah.
And your one kind of contemporary is your enemy, your nemesis, who maybe isn't ultimately your nemesis. I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But I just thought, God, what an unspeakably horrible, hellish, frankly, existence this guy has.
Yeah, and then to top it all off, not only are you alone all the time, but the one person that you were bringing on to help you and support you takes your role and is like, I'm going to be the one that punishes. I'm the creator. I'm the punisher now. I'm the God.
Yeah, he really does just fast forward to like Judgment Day.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening? I'm doing it.
I went back and I was listening to the story of God earlier this week, and I was listening to when God decides that he needs some help and he's going to create a Jesus. And it seemed, of course, I'm thinking of it from the Mormon perspective because I was raised that way. And, the Book of Mormon is the centerpiece of it, right? So I'm thinking you're setting the seeds, you're foreshadowing something that's going to happen later on in the book, but it kind of did, kind of didn't. But it seemed like even from the start, you were setting up this rivalry between God and Jesus, or at least the insecurity of God that Jesus might someday usurp him. Talk about that a little bit. What is that really what you were doing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, everybody likes Jesus better, and for good reason. Jesus is a more attractive character. He's got some appealing qualities to him. God is just a big asshole. He's mean. He's bombastic. He's irrational. Jesus is probably, Mary gave him some good genes somehow in some way. And so he's a more attractive character and people like him better. They love him. In fact, people love Jesus. Yeah. They do. They love him. To this day, people love Jesus to the extent that they weep and they feel for Jesus is so revered and felt on a human level. And God, I don't think is at all, oh, I love God. I mean, what does it even mean? What are you even saying? I love God. Who? I mean, what and why? Furthermore, he's horrible. But so to me, that relationship was really fraught because God so desperately wants to be loved.
Yeah.
And he's not loved. And then Jesus is loved. Mm-hmm. And to me, it fried him. Yeah. But it really bugged him so much so that I had him basically go, you know what? He's not my son, which is what the Quran is. That's his big move in the Quran. That's not my son. That's not my son. That's how I was connecting the Quran into this.
And when you,
but then in
when
the
you
Book of Mormon, then I continued.
Yeah,
then I continued back into the Book of Mormon, and I thought, at a certain point, he's like, damn it, yeah, he's my son. Yes, he's my son. And then he digs deeper into his relationship. The God-Jesus relationship is probably more front and center in Book of Mormon than any of the other books, I would say.
Interesting.
I would say from an outsider's standpoint, what the Book of Mormon does deliver on is that scene. Because if you're a Christian, right, and you just on some level, I think that idea that like he was brutally murdered, and it's just like we don't get the satisfaction. And in Revelations, you get the fantasy of like, well, he's going to come back and he's going to do all this stuff. But Revelations is written in a very crazy, hallucinatory way,
right.
And it's hard to look at it that way. Whereas in Book of Mormon, it's like, all right, here you go. I mean, it's like the action movie, and it's like, here it is. Here it's badass. You know, he's like flying in and he's blowing shit up and he's killing people, and it's like revenge. And why he's getting revenge on all these people, because I think most of them believe in him, actually. But he's killing a lot of people. Maybe only the ones who don't believe. Is that what we're to think?
That's what the idea is that just before he appears in 3rd Nephi, the wicked had gotten more wicked than they'd ever been up to that point, and the righteous had gotten more righteous, and so it was a pretty clean cut of cutting the fat.
You're talking about when the wicked set a date and a time, and they say, if Jesus hasn't come by this time, then we're going to kill all you guys.
No, that was at his birth. That was 30 plus years earlier. That's I believe in Helaman, end of Helaman, first part of 3rd Nephi. So there was that moment, and then 30 years later was the destruction. And right. in that destruction, all the righteous survived, and they all gathered at the temple in Bountiful, and that's where Christ had his pedophilic fire circle.
Ooh,
that's how he wrote it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. I like it when it just feels very pointed to me when Jesus is saying something about himself. He's talking about himself. They love me. They love me. And,
another thing you picked up on was how like 600, 500 years, 100 years before Christ, there were Christians.
Yeah.
and predictions of exactly when he's going to come, where you don't get that in the Old Testament because Christ didn't exist.
Yeah, and then revisiting that when you told the Jaredite part of the story too, that they were around to the Tower of Babel too. People knew about Christ.
They were Christians 2,000 years.
And it's so incredible. Like they know everything about it. Everything. Yeah. It's not just little hints and little kind of allusions like, well, he'll sort of look like this. No, like they know everything about how it's going to go. They know about his life, what he's going to say, how he's going to die. It's
what his mom looks like.
Yeah, it's very peculiar. Like it's a very strange story, actually.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And probably even for active Mormons, I think it's fun to hear non-Mormons talk about Mormons, and like for a non-Mormon to go in and read the Book of Mormon and pay enough attention to it to write a satire of it. I think so. I know just for me, it's fun to read through that. I think for our listeners, others, that they would really enjoy seeing your take on things, because you stumble across things that we have. Then there's things that you touch on, like the brother of Jared. Why didn't Jesus just talk to Jared? And why didn't he give a name to the brother of Jared? That are questions that we ask ourselves, but then do you know that the brother of Jared actually has a name? Did you come across that in your research? Yeah.
No, what is it?
It's Mahonri Moriankamer.
Oh, nice name.
Right? Isn't that wonderful? And this was just like little throwaway, something that Joseph Smith told somebody off the cuff that's recorded in a journal somewhere. He's like, you should name your child Mahonri Moriankamer because that was the brother of Jared. Ha 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 ha, or something like that, whatever he was doing.
And it was too long to etch into the gold plates.
Yeah, there was no character for it. I don't know.
Mahonri, Mori, wow, that's a mouthful.
Maury and Comer. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. First and last names, they had those back then too. It was really convenient.
It's Mahonri of the Moriancomers. You know the Moriancomers. They live in the hills.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Moriancomers.
And his brother Jared.
Jared and Mahonri.
Yeah. Somebody won the naming battle in that one.
I'd never, like, that was, you mentioned something that, like, was always strange to me, and I don't know what explains it, but why does the instrument have a Hawaiian sounding name?
Yeah, I like that section too with the Liahona.
Liahona.
Regarding the Liahona, knowing that the Nephites' journey to North America was going to be exceedingly difficult, God had devised a special tool to help them. The Liahona, and yes, God was very proud of the name. Liahona sounds vaguely Hawaiian, doesn't it, Gabriel? And that's quite interesting, because Hawaiian doesn't even exist and won't for another 1,000 years. The Liahona looked like a cross between what would later be called a magic 8-ball and The Ball from the 1970s cult horror film Phantasm. Follow the directions of the Liahona God had instructed Lehi, but remember, it will only work if you believe in it.
An interesting tool that only works when people believe in it.
Stop.
Doubt undoes you.
Enough.
It always has.
Silence.
You know the truth.
Silence, devil.
Okay, so I've got to ask you, what is this exchange? It surprised me so much when I saw it. I'm sure it's like a payoff on something that you set up earlier on, but what's the Satan God exchange here around the Liahona?
I've used Satan throughout. I used him in the first book,
right,
to kind of be the voice of doubt. That when God questions himself, when God, that Satan is the one who pokes at him a little bit and introduces doubt into his mind, and that makes him really upset every single time. So I did that quite a bit in the first book.
Right.
Job especially. And then I did it earlier in this book with pertaining to Jesus and then pertaining to Muhammad. So it's kind of just how I use the character. It's one of the ways I use the character of Satan.
So what is Satan, like in tying it to the Liahona, because it's like when Satan's saying an interesting tool that only works when people believe in it, is there any subtext to that? Well,
subtext. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a kind of a funny thing. It's a religious, it seems to me that that's a move, this idea that these things only work if you believe in them, and therefore they're not available for skeptics, because it's like magically it just goes away. It just dries up if any scrutiny or skepticism is applied to it. It only works if you believe in it. So I find that idea really specious, obviously. So
yeah.
Poking at it.
No, it makes me think of Church Lady saying, "Isn't that convenient?" It's
very convenient. Yeah, sure. I mean, like, this stuff only works if you believe in it. So therefore, the non-believers, well, it's not available to them because, well, they're wicked and they're going to burn, you know.
Right, wicked and ignorant, and they don't have a Liahona, so how can they know what's real or not about Hawaiian-sounding names or any other anachronisms that actually make perfect sense?
Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? I love, I don't remember where it is, but the Adu crowd.
Right, in Jacob, at the end of Jacob.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Why are they speaking, why French?
Apologists would say Adu had made itself into the English lexicon of the 1820s. It was a perfectly cromulent word to use.
Perfectly cromulent. So did you read the Book of Mormon cover to cover, or did you kind of cherry pick it and go, I'll write about this part? Like, what was your experience researching for what you wrote?
Oh, no, I read it cover to cover at least twice, probably 3 times. No, wow. I read it very, 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 very carefully, in fact, because I wanted to try to understand. Well, I was looking for stuff that I thought was funny and ridiculous, obviously, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to try to see if I could get the story, get the underlying narrative, and get a feel for it, make a connection with it on a deeper level than just, I don't know, poking fun. I mean, I did want to poke fun at it, but I wanted to have a better understanding of it than just that. So yeah, no, I did read it. Yeah.
So one of the things that was a little jarring, I mean, jarring is not the right word, but I just noticed it. You mentioned North America a lot as the setting for the Book of Mormon. And the way that I was raised, I always thought it was Mesoamerica, Central America. They talk about this narrow neck of land that divided the land south from the land north, and they were south of that narrow neck of land. And just wondering, what were the influences that made you choose North America as the setting for the Book of Mormon?
You might have just busted me, dude. I thought...
No. Just say Heartland theory. Say that you researched the Heartland theory and you're good.
It's the Hartman theory, Glenn.
Oh, Heartland.
Clearly.
Yeah. Well, we could go.
I'm using the Heartland theory.
There you go.
No, I don't know. Honestly, it sounded funny to me. I loved the idea that as a stage for all of this, it's not like a narrow. It is the entire. Wait. So we're given a story that covers 1,400 years, right? Isn't that correct from beginning to end?
Yeah.
Are we to think that the entire thing takes place like in Guatemala or something?
The way that I was taught it
that
was
they don't move.
Was that Lehi initially landed somewhere in Chile, and then they made their way northward, and that. There's explorations, there's different times where they're going different places. And then ultimately, where Moroni hides the plates is Cumorah, which some people would say, well, it's a different Cumorah than the one that was in upstate New York, or others would say, no, it was the Cumorah that was in upstate New York. And so there's all this territory that was transversed over this period of time. But
it's a conundrum.
but in all of the illustrations, so when we grew up looking at illustrations of the Book of Mormon, it's all Mayan influence, Mayan, Aztec.
But where in the book does it say Central America? I mean, my understanding
it doesn't. It describes like narrow neck of land. There's at one point where it says that you could go from the East Coast to the West Coast in one day. So as far as like giving some geographical clues.
Yeah, and there was the big battle that was by the ocean. But the biggest thing is that there's not one single solitary mention of snow. So
or chocolate bean,
or maize.
Or maize.
There's wheat somehow.
Yeah. Is there much mention of the physical reality of many of the places that we're told about, though?
No, it's all vague terms. Like they're in the wilderness. They don't say jungle.
I would say it is pretty general, and it feels pretty loose. And I guess I always assumed that the plates were buried in, New York, and therefore it takes place on the continent of North America. That was always my assumption reading it, but if that's not how it, and I don't think he doesn't say in the book one way or the other where it is, right? I thought he was trying to explain where he was from. That was my understanding of it, that he was trying to explain, okay, here we are, and we've got all these Native Americans. He being Joseph Smith, correct, was trying to explain in part the Indians and was why are they there and who are they?
Yeah,
and that was part of what I was going on anyway.
Yeah. Most of those Native Americans were eaten by polar bears as they were crossing the Bering Strait.
Build a wall.
Build a wall. Build a wall. But it is a debate among apologist Mormons. And so when I was saying the Heartland theory, the Heartland theory is the North American theory of Book of Mormon geography. And then there's Mesoamerican theory of Book of Mormon geography. And who knows? It's
yeah. Well, Mormons our age, just like you and me, Glenn, like we were, all the pictures, it was so clear they were in the jungle.
Yeah. Right.
Lamanites look like Mayans and Nephites look like Roman soldiers with Mayan clothing.
That's right. Yeah. They do.
So you're a writer. So I wanted to get your take on the prose and just basically the overall writing quality of the Book of Mormon.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible. I mean, he's the worst, honestly. I mean, he gets points for being audacious. He's really just crazy audacious, this guy. And that he did this when he was in his 20s, I guess. I mean, he's a superstar, man. I mean, he's just the most brazen, ballsy guy. He's an astonishment. As a writer, he's horrible. No, it's mud. I mean, it's absolutely dismal. The character work is terrible.
Yeah.
Structurally, it's terrible. It's not a well-told story. Rhythmically, it's bad. Things don't happen at the right time. Climaxes are not built up to correctly. They just pass. Villains show up at the wrong moment. It's crazy redundant. I mean, it's insane. When he runs out of stuff to say, he just runs back to the Bible and just, basically cuts and pastes and puts that in for a while. I would say the only good stuff is the various antichrists, which is a joke in itself. Because how can you have a bunch of antichrists? And the last one is colossally lame, unbelievably lame. He just basically is described as an antichrist, and then just it seems like he gets just shot in the back, running away practically. He's just nothing.
This is Korihor?
No, not Korihor. I forget the last guy's name.
Oh, is it Jacob?
It's Jacob.
Yeah, it's Jacob. Yeah. He's really lame. But Korihor is a good character.
He's got some charisma.
He's
got some good arguments.
He's fascinating to me because to me it's almost like Joseph Smith allows in. There's some other part of him that he there's something really super fascinating in philosophy and mesmerizing when a philosopher attacks their own ideas. And it doesn't happen very often. And really, in fact, only the greatest philosophers do it. Plato does it in the Parmenides, and Kant does it a little bit in the Critique of Pure Reason. And you're in the presence of a very, very spectacular mind when someone does that. Okay, I don't look at Joseph Smith in that category, but he attacks his own book. He attacks himself. He attacks his own premise. And Korihor is given some very good dialogue. And Korihor, I don't know, how many chapters is he in? He's not on stage and off that quickly. He's on stage for a few chapters.
3 chapters.
Anyway,
I think it's like 3 chapters, maybe more.
That stuff is good. That stuff's really good and really, really interesting. That's the best thing in the book from my standpoint. When this Antichrist, Korihor, or Korihor, as God generally called him, had started to preach, well, that part was old news.
Why are you waiting for Jesus to arrive? You can't possibly know that he's coming.
Blah, blah, blah. Same old specious nonsense, thought God. These remarks had bugged God, definitely, but what had been genuinely enraging was that they'd worked. People had instantly fallen for Korihor's message, and that had led to, what else? Whoring. Why do humans love to whore so damn much? God had demanded of a nearby angel, who'd shrugged so feebly that God had instantly ripped his face off.
Your traditions are foolish. Their actual purpose is to keep you ignorant and frightened. Priests tell you that you're all guilty because of what Adam did. They like it when your heads are down. They don't want you to look up with courage and grasp your basic human rights. Priests want you to be scared of offending this made-up thing called God, who never has been and never will be either seen or known.
God stared down at Korihor at that moment, heart racing. Why am I letting him say all these things, he wondered, on some level genuinely dumbstruck that a moment of such raw power was appearing in this profoundly worthless book. You'd have to be a monumental ignoramus to believe the Book of Mormon had by now crossed God's mind on numerous occasions. But God's man, Alma, quickly let the Antichrist have it with a shot of pure, irrefutable logic.
And like with Alma, I want to go, oh yeah? Like I want to start, oh yeah, with everything that Alma says. Like, oh yeah, you deny there's a God, Korihor, but behold, I say unto you that I know there is a God.
Excellent argument, Alma, God cried down excitedly while reaching for some popcorn.
Can you prove there's no God?
God simply loved that one. You can't prove a negative, can you, whore? Then Alma had bored in even further.
You believe as you do, Korihor, because you're possessed by Satan, that lying spirit who is using you to destroy mankind.
Well, sure. Given that Korihor was technically an antichrist, this wasn't that deep of an insight on Alma's part, but God still liked the way Alma had articulated it. He especially liked hearing Satan described as a lying spirit, because when you got right down to it, lying was pretty much all Satan ever did. I tell the truth, he lies, end of story, God had noted internally. Korihor had then started to argue with Alma, but God had instantly yelled, I don't want to hear any more out of this guy, and he struck Korihor dumb. Oh, that had changed his mind, and quick. Now Korihor suddenly believed in God.
And I wish I could say this with, like, my lips sewn shut.
I do believe. In fact, I always believed I was merely being tricked by Satan.
Knew it, God thought to himself. And then came the question God always found enjoyable. How shall I kill this asshole? When God had thought of the answer, he literally laughed out loud. I'll have people stomp him to death, God had cried in delight. Stomp on this puppety piece of trash until he's pulp. Some people called Zoramites had done just that, and it had been glorious to behold. The Antichrist got stomped to death, God chuckled to himself, shifting heavily in his talking throne. I love that.
Yeah. It's just, it's so disappointing that the only real interesting character gets killed off so quickly without being able to.
It's the most interesting thing by far in the book is that he introduces all of these skeptical voices. It's a very weird, it's the most strange and revealing thing on a psychodramatic level, I would say.
Well, if you had read the Doctrine and Covenants, and I don't recommend it, Joseph Smith is always speaking in the voice of Jesus. And there's a couple of chapters where he's chastising Joseph Smith in the voice of Jesus. And I had it thrown at, or my brother had it thrown in his face once, like, would a fraud chastise themselves in the Doctrine and Covenants?
Yes. Turns out.
A good fraud.
But it does make him a more interesting character, Smith, that is, because it is an interesting thing to do. It is an interesting thing to kind of attack your own ideas and give the character who's attacking your ideas center stage and a spotlight for a few chapters. That's pretty cool. I admire that.
The only glaring flaw with the Korihor thing is Korihor characters giving 19th century atheistic philosophical arguments in a character from 100 BC. So it's a little anachronistic.
Do we know that those arguments were not made? Does atheism in that sense not even exist in 100 BC?
Not in the fully formed way. I don't think that. There certainly was atheism in Greek philosophy. But I'm not a philosopher. But his arguments, the kinds of arguments he was making, were clearly 19th century arguments.
Some of what he's saying is just kind of common sense, though. Some of what he's saying is like, you can't know this. This hasn't happened yet. These are you can't possibly. You're waiting for something that you don't know for sure is going to happen. I mean, he's correct. I mean, he's viewed as evil for saying that, but it's certainly a valid argument, I think.
Well, but the better argument is Alma's, right? I mean, what a rebuttal.
Yes, Alma's rebuttal, right? Yeah, it was very forceful and very blunt.
Basically, he told them, "I know there's God. All the earth and all the things on it prove there's a God."
Yeah. Yeah.
Victory.
Right. Yeah, victory. And then Korihor dies I think he's stomped to death, right? Don't they stomp on him?
Yeah, was Korihor the one, Glenn, that died an ignominious death?
I think so. I mean, I think they all did, but I think he was the one that was trampled by the Zoramites, and that happened just a few chapters before the Rameumptom.
Yeah. Well, I think
or
before
maybe
that,
maybe it was after the Rameumptom. I don't know.
I think they were all struck deaf and dumb, and then all of them, without fail, admitted they believed all along. So they weren't really atheists after all.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they weren't really, and Satan was tricking them, and Satan was kind of puppeting them a little bit.
But they became these very effective straw men for me as a young Mormon teen, and when I went on my Mormon mission, just thinking there's going to be these Nehors and Sherems and Korihors out there that how stupid are they? That they're denying the very evidence of God that's all around them. And here Korihor's like, an angel told me that there's no God. Oh, an angel did. Where do you think the angel come from, dumbass? Like, it worked on me. It totally worked on me. There was some great straw men. Yeah. I think they are meant to be straw men. I just think that for some reason you can almost feel the power of it taking over Joseph Smith. Yeah.
And like, he lets this guy have his say. And it's almost like he's channeling all of his self-doubt.
Yeah.
And he's channeling and it's because he's an amazing salesman, this guy. I mean, he's an incredible kind of confidence man. But he's got other things going on inside him, and there's self-doubt. And so the drama of it, the emotional drama of it, I think is real and pretty powerful.
And one of the less flat characters that are developed, which I think is where you see that identification between Joseph as the author and this creation that he puts in there. Something to do that. Yeah. I like that. I
mean, typically bad guys are good characters. I mean, usually bad guys, just from any writer's standpoint, every writer knows that. It's much easier to write an interesting villain than an interesting good guy. So it should be that the Lamanites have some good characters, but they don't actually, because none of them ever pop. None of them ever jump off the page. They should.
And the best war chapters are in Alma. We have the epic long war. And how do the Lamanites play in that? A white guy goes over there and takes over. The racism is just so saturated throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Another thing you picked up on with the writing is that whoever's good is so good, like all good, and whoever's bad is all bad. And you mentioned, well, they did finally have a character that was good and bad, but my rebut to that is no, but when he was bad, he was all bad, and then when he turned good, he was all good. There's nobody with like interesting internal struggles.
Oh yeah, what about Helaman and Pahoran? Huh?
Helaman and Pahoran.
Yeah, when he like they're on the same side and they're writing the letters back and forth.
Yeah.
Like there's some kind of nuanced perspective stuff in that exchange.
I think the best you could say is that he made Pahoran into a politician.
Sure.
I guess maybe that's the best. Grayish.
Yeah.
It's really more of off-white. Because Pahoran wasn't that bad.
It felt to me like he almost stumbled into a really interesting ending. It's before Jesus arrives, and I can't tell you exactly where it is, but it's the moment where they make come to terms with each other, the Nephites and the Lamanites, and they make peace with each other. And we come and he tells us that there are bad Nephites and there are good Lamanites, and there's an evolution and a kind of a deepening, and they live in peace.
And guess, I don't know if you caught it, Chris, but guess what happens to their skin right after Christ? Everybody turns white, everybody turns white again.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about these books, reading them all lined up, is the Old Testament's not particularly racist. I mean, you kind of get the feeling everybody's sort of the same color, and the New Testament's not really racist, and the Quran is not really particularly racist. And then you get to the 19th century, and oh my God, God is suddenly a virulent racist. Isn't that weird? God is suddenly horribly racist. And then you fast forward another 100 years to a bit of craziness called the Book of Urantia, which I semi-recommend, but mainly not, which is ostensibly a Bible written by superior space aliens, and it's written in the 1920s. And it is the most colossally, it's just so insanely racist. So God just gets more and more racist as these books go along. But he's really racist in the Book of Mormon, where he hasn't been before.
Isn't it interesting how much God seems to reflect the personalities and traits of his believers?
Yes, quite interesting, I would say. Yeah, he's a mirror, right? I mean, that's what he actually is. I mean, of course, we're atheists, right? There is no such guy. There is no such guy. He's us. He's our reflection in the mirror. And we're looking at ourselves, and we're seeing what we are and what we think and what we want and what we're scared of and what we hate and what we love. And looked at that way, it's always very revealing. Every portrayal of God is a great picture of where people are at that point.
Yeah, that's why American Jesus is a Republican.
Yeah, pretty hardcore Republican, I'd say. It's pretty strange. It's a little difficult to square that with Jesus on the page, but yeah.
So when does your book come out, Chris?
It comes out May 15th.
May 15th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will publish this on or around that day to help you out with that. Do you have any other plans? Any ideas for taking this God character into meeting the Greek gods?
Another story,
or
I think I've kind of
exploring the Vedas.
I think I want to take on the Buddha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what did the Buddha ever do to you?
I think he needs to be deflated. I think that this cloak, this gassy kind of sanctimoniousness about Buddhism needs to be stripped away. I think it's kind of just a big joke, just like the others, honestly.
So how would you do that? Would it be the Christian God meets Buddha, or that he takes off a mask and realizes that he is Buddha, or how do you do that?
No, I would just do it using the Buddha. Actually, kind of a similar sort of story, but the Buddha's story, essentially, which is ludicrous and bloated and inane and ultimately fatuous, like all these things are, because there's really just not that much to say. Whatever there is to say about how human beings should behave, it's pretty simple. It's kind of golden rule stuff. There's not that much.
Have you ever read the book Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist by Stephen Batchelor?
I might have. Yes, I did read that one. Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah, he does a good job of stripping away a lot of the bullshit that's been kind of.
I disliked it. I disliked that book intensely, and I dislike him intensely. And Western Buddhists are among the most insufferably smug human beings I have ever come across in my life. And I just want them to get a cream pie in the face. I think that
you're in LA because you're surrounded by them, right?
Well, no, I live in Oregon now, but I did grow up around that, and I've worked in Hollywood, and it's maybe I've interacted with these people more than others, but there's this sort of faux depth and humility and simplicity. But it's okay. This is the Buddha in a nutshell, right? The Buddha talks a great deal about moving away from ego. Ego is a trap. Ego is something that must be overcome. The Buddha also has his followers call him Perfect One. So there you go.
Are you familiar with a recent study that was done that really surprised the guy who was doing the study? He did not expect the results.
What was it?
The people who scored by far the highest of being afraid of dying were Buddhist monks, Tibetan Buddhist monks.
Oh my God, I love that.
If they don't believe in the self, why would they be afraid of the self ending if the self doesn't exist?
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. Because they're supposed to look forward to it, right? It's nirvana. It's the end. Although presumably they're scared because you can get reincarnated as a bunch of bad things, like bizarrely a ghost. You can get reincarnated as a ghost, which makes no fucking sense to me. But you can get reincarnated as a bunch of. So maybe that's what they're scared of. You can get reincarnated in hell. For a religion that's all about love and compassion, boy, they spend a lot of time talking about hell. Oh man, do they rub their hands together in glee about all the different hells. That's awesome. I love that. That weirdly makes sense to me.
Book of Mormon stories that my teacher tells to me are about the layman knights in ancient history. Long ago their fathers came from far across the sea. In the land if they lived righteously.
Hello there. This is your brother. And I have something to say concerning these people. If they do not listen to every minute of every episode of Infants on Thrones, they shall be totally missing out. You can comment on this episode on the website infantsonthrones.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the quorum money. They could buy anything in this world with money. On second thought, just give the quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. A small token for which they have pledged their eternal souls. Anyone for the closing prayer?
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.